Bernie chooses his running mate.
Thanos?
Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America. Well, first of all, we haven't published one of these vids in about a week and a half. We apologize for that.
I apologize for nothing.
There has certainly been news to report on for sure. Apparently, this video has been making the rounds, or this issue has been making the rounds, and so the Middle American Stephen De Herrera brought this to our attention because I've expressed much affection for the big homie Bernie Sanders. So I'm gonna watch it. We're gonna watch it, and we'll check it out. If you want to be part of our Facebook community, all you have to do is facebook.com/AmericaMiddle. You'll also be able to communicate with other like-minded individuals. It's a free speech environment, just a fair warning. And it'll also get you updates for when we do firesides. Now, firesides are many times they have political content. Other times it's just for us to get to know each other as a community and bring the bond closer, because that's the ultimate goal of the channel. Okay, it's also where you can find out where to get gear, like a Middle America shirt or maybe even one of these, etc. All right, so here's Bernie Sanders. I guess this was yesterday or a day ago. Okay. Let's do it.
Human population growth has more than doubled in the past 50 years. The planet cannot sustain this growth. I realize this is a poisonous topic for politicians, but it's crucial to face. Empowering women and educating everyone on the need to curb population growth seems a reasonable campaign to enact. Would you be courageous enough to discuss this issue and make it a key feature of a plan to address climate catastrophe?
Well, Martha, the answer is yes. And the answer has everything to do with the fact that women in the United States of America, by the way, have a right to control their own bodies and make reproductive decisions. And the Mexico City Agreement, which denies American aid to those organizations around the world that allow women to have abortions or even get involved in birth control, to me is totally absurd. So I think, especially in poor countries around the world, where women do not necessarily want to have large numbers of babies, and where they can have the opportunity through birth control to control the number of kids they have, something I very, very strongly support.
I want to introduce, our next guest, Brennan Milliken. He's a graduate student at Columbia University studying climate.
Would you be courageous enough to discuss curbing population growth
in order to successfully mitigate the impacts of climate?
So, this is a silly idea that God Almighty, we're overpopulated, we're going to run out of space and resources. And so, there's a whole bunch of people that need to die in order to make that happen. You know, it's funny, I was in a fireside one time, speaking of firesides, and somebody was saying, Vin, we need to have these abortions so that we can curb climate. You know, we can stop this overpopulation problem. And I said, how about we start with you? And the person got extremely offended.
They did?
Oh yeah. And I asked, and he said, you know, he brought it up a couple times. I said, well, why were you offended?
Yeah.
Why is it okay to talk about killing this group of the population?
Yeah.
But then the minute we turn the laser to you, you're insulted at the very idea. You know, and you know, some Fox News thing said that Bernie Sanders is choosing Thanos as his running mate because, of course, Thanos, who was the bad guy in Avengers, his entire thing was population control. And of course, the irony in the whole thing is that Thanos did not think he was a bad guy.
Right.
He was just believing that he was courageous enough to do what must be done. Wasn't that the shtick?
Children born have known nothing but full bellies and clear skies. It's a paradise.
Because you murdered murdered half the planet.
A small price to pay for salvation.
You're insane.
Little one, it's a simple calculus. This universe is finite, its resources finite. If life is left unchecked, life will cease to exist. It needs correction.
You don't know that!
I'm the only one who knows that. At least I'm the only one with the will to act on it.
I'm courageous, and here it is. Are you going to be courageous enough? Same logic as Thanos. Now,
And us onlookers know that Thanos is the bad guy.
Saddam.
And the future generations are also going to look at us and be able to easily spot the bad guy.
yeah, you know, it's one of those things like replace babies with. What about geriatrics, Mr. Sanders? What if somebody like Andrew Yang got up and said, I'm going to be brave enough and courageous enough to discuss population growth and curbing population growth by getting rid of all geriatrics? How about that? Oh, that would mean that you would have to be one of those people to die.
Right.
We couldn't have that. And why is age? Now, ageism is an actual thing. I mean, you can see it right here across your screen. Here's the definition of ageism. The term ageism was first used by gerontologist Robert N. Butler to describe the discrimination of older adults. Today, the term is often applied to any type of age-based discrimination, whether it involves prejudice against children, which is what abortion is, teenagers, adults, or senior citizens. So this is a form of ageism. We're overpopulated. Get rid of the little kids.
And it's crazy too, because like, let's say you had a family and you love all of your children and you want more children, and then more children come, but you didn't have enough food. Wouldn't, like, people would just like ration that. Like, let's say you were in a situation where you literally only had whatever. You wouldn't say, well, babe, we're gonna have to kill one of the kids.
Well,
we would just water down the soup a little bit more, spread it out. And why does it never come to our minds? Like, we have an obesity problem in America. Honey, it's the truth. Why are we not concerned about the amount? And look, I eat a ton of food. Like, the consumption that we have, and we're consumers. Like, if we weren't like that and we were actually thinking about the other people in other places, then we probably would have more to go around. And then, what a psychotic way to fix the problem. Let's kill people. Instead of saying, let's see what we can do.
Well, in some tribes and cultures, they will leave the elderly behind once they hit a certain age because they're just a drain on the resources. So if we're worried about population control, Mr. Sanders, it's much more rational to get rid of all the older people. They've had all their spins on the planet. There is no next stage of life for them. There's nothing else that they can develop to. So if we're going to do that, if we're worried about this Malthusian apocalypse, Mr. Sanders,
right,
why don't we just clear out all the old people? Oh, that would mean you.
Are you going to be brave enough to say that?
You mean courageous enough to say that, Mrs. Sanders? You know those women over there in those poor countries. Those brown kids. They don't necessarily want all those kids. Look, the statement in itself, I don't think is necessarily problem. The words that he used wasn't necessarily problematic in isolation. The problem is that the young lady who talked to Mr. Sanders and CNN framed the discussion around curbing the population in order to fight climate change. Now, this is a problem because I do believe that climate change is an issue. That's complete. That's a non-controversial in the scientific community for the people who study this stuff. Sorry, guys, it's non-controversial. It's almost at the level of vaccines as far as the non-controversiality of it. But this idea that actual human beings are the problem is extremely controversial, and most of the scientists who actually study this stuff say the opposite. This ideology, by the way, here you go, Scientific American, just so that you guys know that I'm not making this stuff up. But before we get into Scientific American, again, what Bernie said basically was, yeah, we need to give these people, the women the ability to have choice, and then the same rhetoric that people who support killing children and abortion use. Fine, okay. And so from that perspective, it's pretty pedestrian. But again, the problem is the conversation was framed around climate change and population control.
Yeah.
Now, the Washington Post is calling this a gaffe, a real gaffe from Bernie Sanders. So kudos to the Washington Post for that. And people are going all over the place about this stuff. So this is a problem for Bernie, I think. He's gonna have to figure some way out and explain this, because it's unavoidable. He's supporting abortion to curb the population. Where did this idea come from? Well, it came from a priest, actually, by the name of Malthus. Here's Scientific American. Why Malthus is still wrong. Okay, so this is Scientific American. This is not a Christian outlet. This is Scientific American. Here's what Scientific American has to say. If by fiat I had to identify the most consequential ideas in the history of science, good and bad, and the top 10 would be the 1978 treatise, An Essay on the Principles of Population by English political economist Thomas Robert Malthus. Please note that political economy is absolutely, you could say, is a form of science in the metaphorical sense, but it's not science like biology and astronomy. Just note that. On a positive side of the ledger, it inspired Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace to work out the mechanics of natural selection based on Malthus's observation that populations tend to increase geometrically, 2, 4, 8, 16, whereas food reserves grow arithmetically, 2, 3, 4, 5, leading to competition for scarce resources and differential reproductive success, the driver of evolution. So Malthus was saying, well, shoot, we multiply geometrically, 2, 4, 8, 16, but food reserves happen individually, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to get to a point where we're going to run out of food. This is Malthus. Scientific American continues. On the negative side of the ledger are the policies derived from the belief in the inevitability of a Malthusian collapse. Okay, so we're going to get to this tipping point where we're no longer to be able to sustain ourselves. Here's the quote. The power of population is so superior to the power of the earth to produce subsistence for man that premature death must in some shape or other visit the human race. Please note, Mr. Malthus said that premature death in some way or other must, as a necessity, visit the human race. Malthus gloomily predicted his scenario influenced policymakers to embrace social Darwinism and eugenics, resulting in draconian measures to restrict particular populations' family size, including forced sterilizations. Now, we talked about this when we did our expose on Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger, the matriarch of Planned Parenthood, quoted Malthus on numerous occasions to talk about why unfit people should not reproduce. She talked about the radical fecundity of the unfit, I think is the direct quote from her New York Times article, April 8th, in which I had to buy a New York Times subscription. Go look at the video. We'll post the link here. You can see the expose where she directly quotes Malthus. And it also resulted in America taking some interesting measures. But let's continue. Malthus's less than impressive record. So Malthus made all these crazy predictions. None of them came true. Malthus's less than impressive track record has not prevented philosophical copycats from peddling similar gloom and doom scenarios in more recent years. In 1968, Paul Ehrlich, a butterfly specialist, argued in his best-selling book, The Population Bomb, that the cancer of population growth must be cut out by compulsion if voluntary methods fail.
Wow.
Did you catch what he just said? He said, the cancer of population growth must be cut out by compulsion if voluntary methods fail. Do you think that maybe China's one-child policy, as horrible as it sounds, where do you think they got that idea? By the way, oddly enough, in Margaret Sanger's article and on her April 8th article, she talked about going to China and spreading this message to China and how the Chinese were very amicable to it. Then a generation later, they instituted a one-child policy. Yeah. Ehrlich's penchant for apocalyptic predictions made Malthus look like an amateur. Here are a few of Ehrlich's fantastically wrong predictions. I would take even money that England will not exist in the year 2000. The battle to feed humanity is over. In the 1970s, the world will undergo famines. Hundreds of millions of people, including Americans, are going to starve to death.
Is this saying he said that in 1968?
Yeah. He predicted that the next generation, hundreds of millions of people are going to starve to death. By 1980, the United States would see its life expectancy drop to 42 because of pesticides, and by 1999, its population will drop to 22.6 million. All wrong. Now, Malthus and his disciples have been disproven over and over and over and over and over and over again.
Wow, that's crazy, but they're still using his ideas to propagate other things like abortion and...
Correct.
Wow, that's crazy.
Correct. Here's the Scientific American's continued article here when they talked about why Malthus is still wrong. We think of eugenics and forced sterilization as a right-wing Nazi program implemented in 1930s Germany. This is so interesting. You have Bernie Sanders, a Jew, propagating an idea that was used by Nazis.
That's insane.
The Scientific American is saying this stuff, not Vin. Yet, as Princeton University economist Thomas Leonard documents in his book Illiberal Reformers, and former New York Times editor Adam Cohen reminds us in his book Imbeciles, eugenics fever swept America in the early 20th century, culminating in the 1927 Supreme Court case Buck v. Bell, in which the justice legalized sterilization of undesirable citizens. The court included prominent progressive Louis Brandeis and Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., the latter of whom famously ruled 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. The result? The sterilization of some 70,000 Americans. Forced sterilization. Miss Bell was, Carrie Buck was sterilized against her will. This then made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And our Supreme Court, who is in the milieu of this Malthusian eugenics understanding of human beings, ruled. This is the United States of America. There was only one dissenting vote from a Roman Catholic. All the other justices ruled that this was something that you could do. So, and by the way, a lot of people don't know this, Buck v. Bell was never officially reversed. Did you know that?
That's scary.
Buck v. Bell at the federal level has never been reversed.
Jeez.
I've got a good friend, I'm not going to name him, but I've got a good friend who I had a text conversation with. I'll show you the text after. He's like, yeah, we should let unfit people reproduce. I mean, he's a scientist. I get it. I mean, that we're combining Malthusian, apocalyptic theories with eugenics, but this is all coming out of the same milieu. And it's the same, you hear Margaret Sanger, all these people were social Darwinist eugenists. They were all saying it, and Malthus was one of their greatest heroes that justified why we needed to cull the herd, so you could basically kill 2 birds literally with 1 stone. You get to get rid of unfit people, but you also get to make space because of this Malthusian prophecy. You see how that works together?
Jeez.
This is America.
This is why.
Look up Buck v. Bell for yourself.
I prefer to be a Christian.
Look what Mr. Wendell Holmes said about this woman, that she was an imbecile, and there was already 2 generations of imbeciles, and the 3rd generation is enough. So we're going to forcefully sterilize you. And not to mention...
See, if you were seeing the value in a human being, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Not to mention what?
This is not a Christian outlet. This is Scientific American.
Yeah.
We'll put the link in the description. You can read it yourself. here's the kicker. The problem with Malthusians, Bailey writes, is that they cannot let go of the simple but clearly wrong idea that human beings are no different than a herd of deer when it comes to reproduction. Humans are thinking animals. We find solutions. This is what you said. If you're out of soup, just dilute the soup and spread it around. We can think. Now, I'll say that we're image bearers of God, and so that's why we're able to think. But even if you're not a Christian, you don't need to be a Christian to know that there's something vastly different about the way that we prosecute our business on the earth than all the other animals in the animal kingdom. We can find solutions. Humans are thinking animals. We find solutions. Think Norman Borlaug and the Green Revolution. The result is the opposite of what Malthus predicted. The wealthiest nations with the greatest food security have the lowest fertility rates, whereas the most food insecure countries have the highest fertility rates. So Malthus's idea is completely on its head. It makes sense when you look at it on paper, but it does not factor in human ingenuity and the things that we can do to come up with problem-solving skills. Here's the New York Times. This is another right-wing outlet. Overpopulation is not the problem. Many scientists believe that by transforming the Earth's natural landscape, we are undermining the very life support systems that sustain us. Like bacteria in a petri dish, our exploding numbers are reaching the limits of a finite planet with dire consequences. Disaster looms as humans exceed the Earth's natural carrying capacity. Clearly, this could not be sustainable. This is nonsense, says the scientist from the New York Times. Even today, I hear some of my scientific colleagues repeat these and similar claims, often unchallenged. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a myth. It's untrue, and it's at minimum not uncontroversial. Here is the World Wildlife Fund.co.uk. This is a World Wildlife Fund, ladies and gentlemen. Again, not a right-wing outlet. 10 myths about climate change. And they go on to list the silly myth that China is solely responsible. I hear that all the time from my right-wing friends. Oh, it's China! It's China!
Really?
Yeah. So they go, renewable energy is just a money-making scheme again. So they go on to the top 10, stupid myths about climate change, right? Plants need carbon dioxide. They don't have trees, don't grow back. Shout out to MDF, man. Global warming isn't real. It's still cold. So they go through all these, the top 10. You know what number 9 is?
No, what?
Here's number 9 of the top 10 myths about climate change. Getting rid of humans will fix this. Even the World Wildlife Fund is saying that this is a myth. This, we firmly believe, is wrong. It's easy to start feeling that we've gone too far already and that the planet won't be able to support the world's growing population if WWF's mission to build a world where people and nature thrive together. The technology and systems we need to move to 100% renewable energy by 2045 and use our planet's resources sustainably are already available.
Whoa.
What's now needed is for political and business leaders to take bold and urgent action towards those solutions to address the climate crisis and restore nature. Did you see what WWF said, which is a league of scientists who are concerned about climate change? That it is a myth. That human beings are the problem. You know what the solution was? And all these scientists are saying the exact same thing that you said, which is human ingenuity. Mm-hmm. We'll figure it out.
Well, they're saying they already figured it out. We just need other human beings to be bold enough to enact these things.
So, Doc, killing a bunch of people won't stop the problem, Mr. Sanders. Especially those people in those poor countries.
It's literally a psychotic.
Why would you mention the poor countries, Mr. Sanders? Why didn't you mention European countries? I mean, think if Donald Trump would have said something like
this. I know.
If Donald Trump would have said, hey, we've got an overpopulation problem and there's a lot of, people, like, let's say Mexico, that are living under poverty. That's why they want to come here. Mm-hmm. But we're overpopulated. So instead of the DACA stuff and the Dreamer stuff, we need to start building more abortion clinics so that we can get rid of these poor brown people that are trying to come into our country. There would be, Now, there is a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth that's happening.
Yep.
Due to the Thanos-like nature of what Mr. Bernie Sanders was saying. But the fact that this woman got up here, assumed that there's some sort of scientific consensus when left-wing scientists, climatologists, biologists, etc., have written article after article after article after article after article disproving this nonsense. To let this woman say this unchallenged, hey, Mr. Sanders, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I don't know the science behind that, so we're going to have to table that discussion. Mm-hmm. You let this, and then CNN goes and participates in this agenda because they wrote the little ticker at the bottom of the screen. Are you going to be courageous enough? And you see the way they framed it.
Oh, yeah.
So then now, if you're a leftist politician who doesn't believe in killing human beings, now you're not being courageous. Sorry, y'all. And please miss me with the slippery slope stuff because we've already seen forced abortions in China and we've already seen forced sterilization in the United States of America a generation and a half ago. So miss me. Miss me with that. It's not a slippery slope argument. We've already been down the slope. We're just now crawling out of the slope. And now Mr. Sanders, ironically, a geriatric Jewish person who historically, it's the geriatrics. It's the geriatrics who've been left behind to die out in the snow in Alaska. Mm-hmm. And we already know the horrible things that have happened to the Jews.
That's just wild.
Mr. Sanders ought to be sensitive to stuff like that. It's like when somebody told me about Nestle and child slavery. I'm sensitive to that because I got that in my background. You see? I'm sensitive to slavery. So it makes me pause. It's amazing to me that Mr. Sanders this is soft eugenics here, is what this is. This is soft eugenics. Now look, here are the facts. The facts are, Sawyer and I have talked to literally hundreds of people who believe this stuff. Mm-hmm. They don't know the history of Malthus. They don't know Buck v. Bell. They have no idea.
Yeah.
Most of you, when you heard Buck v. Bell in this video, this is the first time you saw it, and you immediately went to Google because you could not believe what I just said, that in your beautiful country of America, when the social Darwinists had the helm, 70,000 American citizens were forcibly sterilized. So this is a problem. It's terrible. I don't know how he's going to fix this problem as far as what he said. It's absolutely horrible and evil. And if you're spouting all this Malthusian stuff, you better make sure that you've got your data, because there are many scientists over and over again who've told us the same things. We know how to stop climate change. We know how to do it. We find alternatives to fossil fuels. That's going to take a big chunk out of it. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that we can do. We don't need to kill human beings. And if we do need to kill human beings, then you make sure that it's your demographic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because your demographic is the only demographic you could speak for. Isn't that true?
Oh, yeah.
I can't speak for white people. I can't speak for women. I can't speak for Jewish people. So if I'm going to promote a eugenics agenda where we're controlling the population, I'd only have the right to speak about my demographic. Mm-hmm. Black males. You know what's funny? In 2014 and 2015, more black babies were aborted than born in New York City. Mm-hmm. So I guess that solves, I guess black folks are doing our part to stymie the scourge, or what does he call it? The cancer. Ugh. Human beings aren't cancer, Mr. Malthus. Cancer is cancer.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too is, let's just say human beings were cancer. It's a horrible analogy, seeing as the human beings were the ones that came up with the solution of how we could enact this stuff to save the planet.
Seduct.
And it's not by killing other human beings. It's by using our minds and making it happen.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, there you go. The links will be provided in the description. Do the research yourself. Come to your own conclusions. This is the thing about the Democratic Party, is that, this is the last thing I'll say, is they get forced. I was willing to hold my nose and vote for Bernie. His abortion policies are absolutely horrible, and as Jordan Peters said, it's clearly immoral. Mm-hmm. But I was willing to say, you know what? At the state level, we can. It's just like Buck v. Bell. Buck v. Bell is still at the federal level something that is allowable, but at the state level something that is not. So I look at abortion that way. But then you say stuff like this, and now it's different, right?
Yeah.
But this is what happens, is that these leftists, they're so caught up in their own little echo chambers that they have no idea about what they're doing to the actual party. We're not Democrats. If you read most of the comments in this comment section, most people are like, you guys are Republicans, da 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 da. And we were going to vote for Bernie last time if the DNC wouldn't have taken him for us, and we were going to vote for Tulsi. Now it looks like it's between Bernie Thanos ticket and a what do you call it? A Biden and his caretaker ticket, a stock for a law. This is where we are. So anyway, definitely, I hope what happens is that Bernie looks at it and goes, hey guys, I spoke blah blah blah, I shouldn't have framed it that way, it was framed incorrectly, yada yada yada, my apologies. But you know, this is a couple hours old, so we'll see. Unbelievable. Love your neighbor.
Take care of each other.
Middle America.
We are the media.
Till next time, y'all. Babies are cute, by the way.
Nice.